Okay, so it's the 20th of November 2018, and I'm here with Cliff Davis. I'm Sally Deakin for the Kingsland Oral History project. So, Cliff, why don't you just, to start off, tell me a bit about yourself? Tell me a bit about yourself.
Right, well, it's to do with Kingsland, I take it.
Yeah.
I was the great age of 6 weeks old when my family moved from Leominster to Kingsland, not very far. And apart from about 2.5 years, I've lived in Kingsland ever since. This is a secret, but I'm now 82 years old, so it's been a long time. I moved in the 70s to Buckfield Road for 2.5 years to get on the house list, buy my first house. And then luckily the house I live in today was being built, and then I thought it was private, but it was put on the list. When I went down one by, the Jackson's board was outside, so I carried straight on into Leominster and I did a deal. And we moved in 3 months later, and that was December, the beginning of December 1977. So what's that, 41 years? Any time now. Yeah. And I've been very happy to do so. I've got family around me, and that helps as well. But I've been in the village all that time. I actually worked in the village, a lot of it, for Herefordshire County Council, in the highways department, and I actually did 26 years with them before leaving and going up to the Tilcon quarries at Kington. So I changed from buying tarmac to selling it. And finished my working days out up there. In Kingsland, I've sort of been involved in lots of things down the way. In my younger days, it was all sport. Kingsland had a cricket team which folded in 1952 for lack of players, and I was just leaving school then, and had to move out of the village and go elsewhere to play cricket. But the time went by, and we got back to 1960, and we started up the club again, and it's still running today. From Kingsland we became Luctonians Cricket Club, but it was the same club and run by the same people, and that's gone very well, and had a lot of fun out of that, and I only finished 3 years ago. I had a nice long career at cricket. Going back to the 50s, I'd been to Lucton School and played rugby, but when I left school I went back to football and played in minor leagues, and then I played for Kingsland in the North Hereford League, and became captain. First spell, I was a goalkeeper and did quite well, and represented the county, and I even had a trial for the old England amateur select. I didn't get very far. It was unfortunate, really. I had a game against a select people from all around the West Midlands. But we had the best team. So being a goalkeeper, I didn't have an awful lot to do. So I couldn't show myself off. And I had a letter of thanks, but I didn't get another call on that. But I did have a spell when I played a few games for Hereford United second side in the Birmingham League. Their first team keeper had been injured, so the second team keeper moved up, and they called on me to take his place. So I had a little spell there. That was a nice experience. And then I moved up to Kington and played in the Mid Wales League, which was quite a bit of travelling. We had several sides on the shore. Aberystwyth with the two fixtures there, one with the town and one with the college, and Barmouth and Towyn, another one, Mahunsleth. So we had quite a bit of travelling, and then all through the Mid Wales, Llandrindod, Newtown, Llanidlas, and those sort of places. I had 5 very good seasons there when the side it was a good side, and we won a lot of trophies, and we won that league twice, which was pretty good. And then all of a sudden, I got talked into coming back to play rugby to Luctonians, and Robin East was to blame for that. No, I won't blame him. I'll thank him. And I played from 1966 to 1978 rugby. I was getting on a bit then, but I only retired because at that stage I will mention this. My brother was in the Fleet Air Arm, and he'd been flying with the Navy for 25 years, but he had to eject from a Phantom jet plane which had an engine problem, and sadly had a bad landing and broke his back. And the other thing I mentioned, prior to that I had lost 2 brothers. So I felt somebody had to stay fit to look after the old folks, so I gave up rugby. And that was the end of my playing career. But I was in my 40s, so I enjoyed that. But the cricket went on.
So you've done an awful lot of sports through your life.
Yes.
So what, you said at the beginning that you moved to Kingsland at the old age of 6 weeks.
Yes.
So what are your earliest memories of Kingsland? When was that, and what do you remember? What's your sort of earliest memory?
Yes, I have been asked that a few times. I think my earliest memory excuse me, was right next to me where they built the new houses, Mortimer. On there was a building, a wooden building, but with a brick chimney and fireplace and whatever, which was a club. And there was tennis courts there, and they played billiards or whatever, and the men did. But and I think the year is about right, 1939, and it stroke 40. So I wasn't very old, but unfortunately there was a fire. The fireplace had been cleaned out at night, and the ashes tipped where they'd been tipped for years, but apparently a wind got up and the fire started and it burnt the club down. and I can just remember all the fuss and all the people of the village. The fire brigade then were stationed in at the back of the Crows, and to call out the firemen, Mr. Williams, the postmaster, used to take the call or whatever and cycle up to the Crows and ring a bell on the tower. They had a tower there. And that called the firemen out, but it also called all the people out. They all used to come out and watch the firemen go off. And of course it was just up the road, 100 yards. And sadly that was burnt down. I think that was my earliest memory.
And whose club was this?
Village club.
It was a village club?
Yes, yes.
The building and the tennis
Yes,
court.
that's right.
And,
I mean, I think the building perhaps belonged to the Nicholsons that lived in Croftmead next to it.
okay.
It was their piece of land. Yes.
So how old were you then? You must have been...
Well, I was about 4. I was born in June 36. So I was about 4, 3 to 4.
And where were you living then?
I was living then where we'd moved to from Leominster, which was in Birch Avenue, which is there's a pair of red brick houses at the bottom of what is now the village playing field.
Yes.
Right, you can see them?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And my family moved into number 1 Birch Avenue, and my grandmother moved into number 2 Birch Avenue. They both moved out of the Bargates in Leominster and came up. So, yes, that's where I was living then.
And who was in your family then? Were you the youngest, oldest?
No, I was the youngest when we moved.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, I had a sister and a younger brother. So we were and I had 2 older brothers. I was the middle one then. So we had 5 children there. And I lived there until I got married in 1972.
So tell me about your house when you were small. You lived in number
1, Birch
and
Avenue.
your grandmother was in number 2.
Yes.
What was it like? Take me for a walk around your houses.
It was very nice because we had a nice sized garden going down as far as the Rectory Wood, as it was called then. But between us and the Rectory Wood was the Birch Walk, a footpath going from the Rectory corner, as we knew it, right through to the church. So we could always walk down, and we had a gate out onto the path, and we could always go down there and into the field, which was called the Greens, which was, at that stage, it was all glebe land, but it was used by the school as a playing field, the top end, and the rest was, there was the Mott and Bailey area ran through that from Kingsland Castle on the Mound. And it was all natural playing area for us, and walking. And we'd go on down to the Pinsley, and paddle in the Pinsley.
And tell me about your home. What about sort of day-to-day things like water and heating and sewage?
It was a brand new house.
Mm-hmm.
We were the first people into it. That was the problem. It was just like all houses, a little bit behind schedule. And I was about to be born when they got there. But my mother got pleurisy, and the doctor had called to see her in June, this was, and she had a fit of coughing, and I popped out. I was 6 weeks early, you see. I should have been born in Kingsland, but there we are. And that was me. But my next brother up was 2.5 years older than me, and then I had an older brother who was actually 7 years older than me. That was the three of us that moved in, and then my sister came along in 1942. So she was 6 years younger than me, and then my other brother came along in 1945. So he was 9 years, or 10, because it was right at the end of the year. He was in December.
So what did your dad do? What was your father's work? What
My father, he'd been in the forces, in the army, in the tank corps between the two wars, but he wasn't called up. He was just getting a bit older, you know. But he was working for, and I can't remember the name, but it was a national company on steel work, steel erecting, mainly for all the period of the years, building aerodromes and this sort of thing all over the country, right up to Whitehaven. I remember as a place that he was at, you know, in Lancashire, and yes, and he did that right through till the end of the war. After that, he actually at the Kingsland sawmills, they were building a new crane, and they got him to go and do the steel work for this big crane that was at the top end of the yard. And when it was done, they asked him if he'd like to drive it. So he became a crane driver for a while, and did that. But then he went back to Frank Dale at Leominster on the steelworks again. And he sort of finished the steelworks at retirement age, but carried on working for Mr. Dale at his Ayton Hall, and worked for him for a few more years.
Oh, right, okay. So you moved into your new house, and then you said your earliest memory was this fire.
Yes.
At the clubhouse. Yes. What about after that? What do you remember after that?
The war.
Because you were oh, okay.
Yes, I
tell me
remember
about Kingsland.
Yeah, I remember the war very clearly. Right next to us, to our house, beyond it, still a spare piece of land now. Or anyway, they built a wooden hut, a big, large wooden hut for the Home Guard, the Kingsland Home Guard, and cadets, and that was run from there. So we saw that. We were kept in touch with that.
Oh, describe that. Tell me what you remember about that, the Home Guard, and so it was they were next door to you.
Going out on parade and the marching and all that sort of thing, and they used to go up to Lagbridge. As we were growing up, we were allowed to get out a bit further. Go up as far as Lagbridge here and doing manoeuvres and what have you. We used to look at all that and watch them. Yeah, it's good. And the club also had the building also was a part of it was a club there because they lost the other one. So we used to go in and they had an auto-ball table, like a bit like billiards. But
oh right, okay.
It was just it was no bigger than from here to there, about 4 feet long, and we used to go in and play auto-ball and ping pong in there.
How old were you then?
Well, it was in the 40s, so I was coming up to 10 sort of thing, 8 to 10, that sort of age. We had some good fun there, and it was right next to us. In fact, I think we used to keep the key to the hut for people that wanted it. We had a key at our house for it.
Mm-hmm.
And in those days, of course, there was no village hall there. It was an orchard, and with all sorts of apples and pears and whatever. And there was a nice open area in the middle where the football pitch is now, basically. And so all the lads used to collect there and weekends and things and play football on the field and help themselves to the apples. That was quite good. It belonged to Hamlyn Williams, who lived at Angel House, and he built the houses that we moved into. They were his houses, and we were tenants. He owned quite a lot in Kingsland in those days.
Where did he live?
Angel House, between the post office and the
right.
Angel.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Mm-hmm. So you were talking about there was a group of you, but I presume you started school in Kingsland?
I started school at age 5.
Okay. What do you remember about Kingsland School then, when you first started? Oh, you brought a book.
That's the history of Kingsland School, the first 150 years.
Yeah. Tell me what your memories are.
My memories of Kingsland
School. Going to school in Kingsland School when you were little.
Yeah.
What was it like?
A bit old-fashioned, I suppose, but we didn't realise that. I used to walk to school up across the field from the house and go in the playground. And as you know, the school now with the classrooms going down to a playground, that wasn't there. The actual wall to the field was there, and so it was all grass. And the playground wasn't all that big, but it's where they've got that wooden hut built and that sort of thing. So it was a smallish playground. The school they built onto as well, a classroom, so it was bigger than the mind sort of tells you today. I went into Miss Morgan's class. Miss Mary Morgan, she taught the infants first 3 years, and she had 3 sections, and that was in the classroom which were back onto the road, right down there.
Can you describe it to me? What was the classroom like? What do you remember about it?
What I remember most about it was the fire. We had a great big iron stove with a guard around it, and that was our heating. The old-fashioned tables and chairs, and the older boys had desks with lids on, and we were put into 3 sections. And how she did it, I don't know, but she taught us all. I remember learning to read with our ABC with pieces of cardboard, 3 pieces, hung on a string with a capital A and a smaller A and something else. There were 3 things anyway, and all the different letters on the wall for us to learn the ABC. But somehow she got through it and taught us all to read, and taught us our tables. That was the most important thing. We learned the tables. We did that, and we went out to play, and there wasn't much else really. She read us stories. She was very, very good, and to get children started who at age 5 knew nothing, and got us going. And then we went up into another Miss Morgan. I won't say it. Fat. And she was known as that. And in one of the other rooms, and that was what age were we there? We were about 7 and 8 there, and she taught those.
What was that classroom like?
It was a big room, the length of the school really, but it had a curtain down the middle, across the middle, and there was this class in the one half, and then Mrs. Davis's class going up again in the other half, and just the curtain between us. She got us into learning properly, you know, having done the basics with the other Miss Morgan, and then from there we went into Mrs. Davis, who then got us ready for the 11th class, and we did that, and then what is now the hall in the village, in the school, that was Mr. Jones's top class, because the children were there till they were 14.
Okay.
Because they left school at 14 and went to work. My eldest brother John left school at 14. He didn't go to a secondary school, but he left and went to work at 14.
Wow.
You can't imagine it today, can you?
Where did he go to work at 14?
He went to the Kingsland Station as a porter. That's how he started. He moved on from the station to Leinster to the, I forget what they used to call it now. It was the workshops where they maintained the engines, and they did that, and that was night work because the engines were out all day. So they went in and worked at night time on the engines and maintained them. And he moved on from that to a fireman. And he did the fireman. He did some to Kington, the Kington coffee pot we used to call the train, up and down, and he also used to go to Worcester, on the train to Worcester, and he was he worked on that for a long time.
Do you know why it was called the Kington coffee pot?
Because he used to come up going toot 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 toot, and the puffs used to go up, you know, out of the chimney. I don't know. Somebody thought of it. Kington coffee pot. Yes, and that ran through till the line was closed, and in fact, John, my brother, was fireman on the last passenger train that went to Kington. In the 50s, that was about 56 or something, or 58. The goods trains did run for another couple of years, and then they stopped the goods trains as well.
So he went as a porter at 15. I mean, what was
14.
14. What was the station like then? Kingsland Station.
Very smart. There's a painting hung up in the post office of Kingsland Station. Now you must go and see it. It's in the cafe at the back.
Cafe.
Yes, it's there on the wall, and it was a nice long platform. There was a room where the porters used to work out of. There was a waiting room for the passengers. And then there was the station master's area, and then there was the high built-up signal box, which was right by the road. There were 2 gates across the road then.
Where were the gates? I'm just trying to think.
You know, when you go past Border Road now, and then there's a house, isn't there? There's a yard and then a house. Well, that house, it was an old porter's lived in that house, and the gates were just past that house there, this side the river bridge. Yeah. That's where the line went up. And they used to do coal out of the yard there. I think they still do, don't they?
Yes.
Evacuees, I think they still do. Yeah. Yes.
So your older brother, he went off at 14 straight into work, but you were still at school.
Yes.
Preparing for your 11 plus.
Yeah. Carl, my middle brother, the next one up, he got a scholarship to Lucton and went to Lucton School, and I followed him 2.5 years. Well, 3 years later, I think I went to school, and we all cycled to Lucton every day, backwards and forwards.
Tell me about your cycle rides to school every day. How far is that?
Yes, I can tell you about my cycle rides to school. The number of times I fell off my bike. And I think the worst was when I was coming down the back road, because, this road, and up from the crossroads, coming down there in the pouring rain with dropped handlebars, and I had a cape on, and everything was wet, and my hand grip came off because it was so wet, and my brake handle was a bit loose, and that came off and went in my front wheel, and I went straight over the handlebars and hit my forehead on the road. Never been the same since. But that was about my worst. But we did have quite a lot of accidents. Like riding down that little narrow lane, 3 abreast, no-handed, arms round each other. Then you go around the tight bend at the bottom and mayhem. Yeah. We did that 5 years I was there.
So you were cycling to and fro every day?
Yes, yeah.
Because Lucton School must have been very different as well.
Well, yes. I mean, that big block of dormitories that is there now wasn't there. The boarders used to sleep up in the top 2 stories of the old building. And most of the lessons were in the separate block across the play area where we went to. But yeah, we cycled. I remember that well enough. My first day, the day boys had their own changing room at the bottom end of that area, and just a little bit of downhill there. And it was before starting time, before the first assembly. And we were all stood out the bottom, and the older boys were watching the new boys come in and all this. And one lad who was a senior big fella came running down, "Back to school!" And he swung his hand and he hit me straight in the eye. So I had a black eye before I even went to my first class. So that's to remember. And the other thing they did, when you'd been there 3 days, you had a ducking. They've filled the bowls in the changing rooms with water, and there was always one that had been left, and it was horrible. Anyway, for some reason, they grabbed me on my first day, and they three times under the water and held under the water, and then you were Luctonian, eh?
Then you were part of the school.
Yes, yes.
Amazing. So back in Kingsland,
yes,
you were at school. You said a lot about we, and you said about playtime. What did you used to get up to out and about? Where did you go? What were you...
Well, here on the tars.
Okay, we're looking out at the back of Log Mill.
That's right.
Up the river.
And it was all, as I said earlier, it was all sort of bracken and bushes and trees. And then up into the wood, we used to go up into the wood and the tars wood and climb the trees, go bird's nesting, which was a done thing in those days. And in the summer, swim in the weir.
Tell me all about that. You mentioned this earlier.
Yes.
Well, it was
the weir. Have you been up there?
Yeah.
And there's a weir there now, isn't there, across the angle? Well, in those days, the weir wasn't at an angle. It was in line with the river coming down, and it had locks on it, and it pushed the water down at right angles to the flow of the river, instead of at an angle. And that was really, really deep. It was about 8 foot deep, something like that. So it was summertime, we spent a gang up there swimming and shoving others in. And Hamlyn Williams used to come up and swim there in his big costume with over the shoulders, you know. And I can see him now standing on the bank, because there was a high bank just up from the weir and a deep area, standing on the bank, showing us how to dive. And he was there on his tiptoes, and you stand up and you get your balance, and all of a sudden he lost his, and he fell and did the biggest belly flop you ever saw, because he was quite a big chap. Because that's one very funny memory. But we spent lots of time up there.
You say we. Who's we? How many lads used to get up there?
20. There were a lot of children here then. And during the wartime, of course, we had the evacuees.
Tell me about that. That's interesting.
Yes. Well, the evacuees came into most houses who'd got a bit of room. We hadn't, of course, but my grandmother next door had 3, and most of the houses in Kingsland who got room had evacuees, and they filled our school. And at one stage, the school had to go to mornings and afternoons to cope with the numbers. Yeah, that's right.
So where were your grandmother's evacuees from? You said she had... where did they come from?
Bootle. I remember that. But a lot came from Harwich. There was a family came... The Carlsons, opposite the village hall. There was a family came there, the Pratts. 4 brothers, and the eldest wasn't at school long, but he got a job and stayed, and then the other, and then the 2 youngest I remember best, Douglas and Jeff. And Jeff actually lives in Hereford today. He married a Kingsland girl.
Really?
Yeah. Yes, he lives in Hereford today.
So was he older than you?
He was probably 18 months to 2 years older than me, something like that. But Doug was a bit older than him. But we all played together. We all played football on the greens, and there were a lot here, a lot of evacuees here.
So what was Kingsland like during the war? You had lots of evacuees here.
Mm-hmm.
What changed, do you think? What was it like?
What was changed?
You mentioned the Home Guard, you mentioned the evacuees.
Yeah.
Where did you, get everything from food, milk.
Well, we had a
papers,
shop.
meat.
We had a shop next to the school.
Oh, what shop was that? Tell me
That
about
was it was
Is that Edgefield?
Yes, and the front of that was wide steps going up into a double doorway. It's a brick wall now, but yes, and the windows which are there now were big windows which they used to display their food and stuff in, and the shop went right the way across Edgefield, all the way across the front half, and then the back half, I don't know, really, they used to store. And then on the left, where the other house is, they call it the bakehouse, is it? Was the bakehouse, and they cooked bread there. And they also baked potatoes there for us. And we used to go around at break time and for a penny get a baked potato. And we used to rush around and try and get first to pick the biggest. I did that one day. I was first one day, and I ran in, and I was suddenly stopped. On the counter was the bacon machine with a big handle, and the handle coming out, and I ran straight into the handle with my right eye. So I don't know whether I got a potato that day or not. I think they'd all gone by the time I recovered from that.
And who ran the shop? Who ran the shop? What was it like inside? Tell me. And who ran?
Well, Mr. Beale was the owner. There was a chap called Jack Wood, who lived just down below me on the edge of the road coming down from Birch Avenue, in the last cottage. It's just been sold, I think.
The one that backs onto yes, I know the one you mean.
Yeah. It goes.
The one
The
they've just
garden
done
goes
up.
along the road.
Yeah, the one they've just done up.
Yeah.
That was sold. Yeah.
He lived there. He used to work there, and he also used to deliver things around the village on a three-wheeled bicycle with like a box on the back fitted to it, not a trailer. It was fitted to it. And he used to deliver stuff around the village on there. And he also used to work in the bakehouse a bit. But we had a baker called Jack Woods, who lived out on the Urdsland Road, just after you get onto the main Urdsland Road at the T-junction. Turn right, just along there on the left in a cottage. And his wife was Nurse Wood. She used to be the local nurse and work with the doctor.
And who was the doctor?
The doctor
then
was Dr. Vaughan. Do you know Derek Vaughan, who died earlier this year? Derek's father was the doctor then. And he lived in Red House, which is the house next to the entrance to the Orchard Close.
Yeah.
Well, Orchard Close and all that was his garden and lawn and that. We used to go and play football and goodness knows what at the back of there. But he was the doctor, the only one. And he had a little brick building at the back of the house. I think it's still there. If you look up the drive, I think it's still there.
I think it is.
And we used to go there, and he had a what's the word's gone straight out of my head? What you call it when you go to the surgery?
Surgery.
There's a surgery each morning from about 9 to 10:30. And in the evening, I think it was from about 6 to 7:30. And in between that, he was visiting customers, those that needed it. He was a busy man. And he was there all on his own. And you go, and there'd be something, might be a chest cough or something or other. And he'd got a little place at the back which he walked through to. Oh, you didn't book appointments. you just went and queued. And he'd go in the back then and sort something out. He'd come out, shaking the bottle, and he always said, without fail, "This will put you right." And invariably did in time. But yes, he was very good. He wasn't very good. He did me a big favour. In 1947, it was just before I'd gone to Lucton School. I went in the September. In the winter of 47, everything was snowed up and frozen up here. A lot of snow. Carl, my brother, couldn't get to Lucton, so he was at home. But I walked to Kingsland School. But at lunchtime, this one day, I got over the fence back into the orchard, because at the bottom always formed a lake in the winter, and that was frozen solid. And Carl was there sliding on it, see? So I got over the fence and joined him, which I shouldn't have done, out of bounds when you're in school. Anyway, I got found out. I fell over and something hurt badly. And you'll excuse me for showing you my leg. This is since 1947.
Oh, goodness me, that's a huge scar under the knee.
There was a piece of jagged wood frozen at an angle in the ice, and I fell against it, and it took a piece, sinews and all, right out of there. And I was lucky at that time because Dad was working at the sawmills at that time, and he was lunchtime and he was at home. And I got up the orchard somehow, and Mother wrapped it up, and he took me on the bar of his bike down to Dr. Vaughan, and Dr. Vaughan stitched that. That big scar, just 3 stitches. Because there was a gap there, you see, this come out. And he pulled the middle one together, and then he pulled that one together, and then that, I should never forget how much that hurt in the small of the leg there. And he pulled that one, those 3 stitches. And then he put some yellow stuff on it, which looked like lemon curd. He put that on it, and apparently it had some penicillin in. Penicillin was only just coming to light at that stage.
I was just going to say, because antibiotics, that was really...
Yeah.
Because this was 1947.
Yeah. And he put that on that, and amazingly, it healed. I thought I'd missed out on the pantomime. It was the first pantomime they'd taken the school to in Hereford, in the Kemble in Hereford. And anyway, we had a lady at school doing dinners, Mrs. Lewis from Cobnash. She was French. Spoke with quite a French accent, you know. And she grabbed me and looked after me. She put me on the bus in the front seat. And when we got to Hereford, she got me out first. Took me out, I was on crutches, and took me down right into the front seat at the pantomime. Oh dear, that was lovely. And because I didn't think I was going to make it. Yeah, but amazingly, the job Dr. Vaughan did on my leg, and I've never forgotten it. And when you think of all the sport I played since.
Well, it's a huge scar, extraordinary.
Yeah. I might well have been finished, mightn't I? Could have done something and finished me, but no.
So what else was in the village? You mentioned the shop and the bakery.
Yes,
Dr. Vaughan
post
in the
office.
Red House. Oh, yeah, tell me what was the post office like?
But the post office was only... the front bit where you walk through, don't you, to the back. Well, it was only the front bit, and there was a counter right the way across, and that was it. And on the left of it, left of the door, was a little private room with the telephone exchange in. So it was only that side, basically the width of the door and out to the wall there, and Mrs. Williams ran the post office and her husband, but he was sometimes going to the fire to ring the fire bell.
Oh, he went to ring the fire bell.
But yes, and they ran it for during the wartime and quite a few years after. After that, I think Ali Davis took it on.
Okay.
I don't think there was anybody in between. I can remember. Yeah.
So the telephone exchange, was that connecting people?
The telephone exchange was the ones you've seen upright here with wires to plug into holes and that, yeah. And you picked up your phone if you had one, and it rang a bell there, and he plugged you in and got you, and then he rang and connected you to somebody. It was amazing, really.
Mm.
And the first strange thing is, when I went to work, before I went to work at the council, I worked for Bengries at Shirlheath.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into the office and worked there. And my first job was on the desk and doing the general things sort of thing. And operating, they'd got one of these for all their numbers, because we had 4 incoming lines. And it was quite busy. And so I used to operate that. And another thing I did, Mr. Williams at the post office, his son used to sit and work the phone quite often, and that's what in the early days Mr. Williams had done. You had to have somebody there, not that it was going regularly, but you had to get somebody there to answer it. And Fred, his son, used to work it. And when there was test match on, and the commentary on the radio, he'd ring me on 304. We had 301, 302, 303 and 304. He'd ring me on 304 to engage that one, not the business ones, and put the phone by the radio that was giving the broadcast on the test match, and I'd plug in and I'd sit there and I'd be doing my work, and I'd be listening to the and when if I got a call in, I just put it on hold, did the call, and then went back again. Mr. Bengry never twigged that.
And how old were you then? That was your first job, was it? How old were you then? After
I was about 17, 18, 17 there. Yeah, I was there. I worked there 4 years, I think, before I went over to the council. Mm. Yeah. Our council office, Divisional Surveyor's Council Office, was the surveyor and me, and it was in the front room of the Showers farm.
Oh.
We just walked in through the big front door, turned left into the room, and that was it.
Okay, I never knew that.
We had a phone there. We ran that office from there. I went there in 64, was it? No, before that. 54, 58 I went there. And we were there till about 1970. And then they built We had a depot up at Shirlheath and they built an office and we moved up there.
Okay. So it was all run out of Showers Farm, I had no idea.
The Showers was Tom Morgan. He actually lived across the road at Green Park, but his three maiden sisters, teacher Mary Morgan being the youngest, and then there was Sylvia, and then there was Lily, and they lived in the house. And Tom Morgan was a brother of theirs, and he lived at Green Park, but farmed the farm all around, which they've now made into houses, haven't they? Yeah. And he had a son, Arthur, who carried the farm on after him until he died.
Oh wow, okay, yeah. That's interesting.
But it was an ideal spot. I had my big desk in the bay window, looking out onto the lovely lawn, which had got the croquet hoops on. And they used to keep, these girls, sisters, used to keep the garden beautiful. And that was my view for work.
Oh.
And the surveyor, Mr. Harding, used to sit behind me on his desk. Yeah, that was good.
So,
yes.
Back at school, at Kingsland School, you've told me about up here. What else did you used to do? What else was in Kingsland? Because there's
we had 4 pubs in those days.
Tell me about that.
The last one to go was the Monument,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't all that long ago, really. But we had that. And we also had the Lion, round the corner at the bottom end of the village.
Tell me about the Lion.
The house on there. That was very much a beer house, I would call it. Well, most pubs were in those days, but that was pretty bleak. Don't repeat that.
No, it's interesting that you said it was bleak. Describe it to me. What was it like when you?
Well, there was 2 rooms as far as I remember, a bar and the drinkers' room and the other. Did they call them smoke rooms or something? Yeah, in the other one, and that's fine. Not that I went in there very much because it was a long way to walk. But I did go in there a few times. But the funny rule there, if you played darts there, as soon as somebody got out and won a game, the landlord pulled 2 halves of beer and put on the counter. And you don't play darts in my pub free. You had to buy the 2 halves of beer for the one for yourself, one for the winner, you know. And that was the one rule I remember down there. But didn't go there a lot. We used the Angel and the Corners in the most. We used to go up to the Monument with my folks on a Sunday evening after church, you know, and they'd have a drink, we'd have a lemonade and sit outside in the summer and walk up, because we hadn't got a car. There weren't many cars in Kingsland.
Yeah, that was something I also wanted to ask you about, because you said your father, he took you on the handlebars of his bike to the
on the bar. Not the handlebars, on the bar.
On the, yeah.
No, there weren't many cars in Kingsland. Hamlyn Williams had got one. At one stage, he had a Rolls Royce, and the number was CUL4. What about that? I can still remember his number. And he was, I think he was chairman of the county council for quite a spell, and he used to go to Hereford a lot. He used to take this big posh car. The doctor had a car. The vicar had a car. There were many more. There were 1 or 2 farmers had cars. Yeah. But it was better for us because we used to play hockey on the corners on our roller skates. You know, and if a car came, well, we just rolled over.
So you're playing on the road?
Playing on the road, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a nice bit of tarmac and, yeah. Played hockey, hockey there.
And you mentioned the pubs. Tell me about the Angel. Who was there? What was that like?
Yeah, the Angel changed dramatically since. You used to go through the front door, and there was a passage going right to the back. All that passage is now in the room. You know, they took the one wall down, right to the back. There was again a smoke room on the left, the bar on the right, and another little room off the passage. I think perhaps residents used to sit in there because they always took a few residents, and the bar used to go as far as the posts that are there now in the middle. Beyond that was again like a private dining room in there. But busy, always busy. We had lots of fun there.
What sort of fun did you have there?
Well, we played darts and cards, and they also ran for a while. They ran an air rifle team because there used to be a league in the area, North League, and they had a wooden shed, long shed out the back, which I'll come to that again in a minute. The Luctonians used to change in when they started playing rugby, and we used to shoot in there, and that was good fun. They also used to shoot at a different time at the Corners Inn, and we used to go upstairs to do it there.
Really?
Yes, there was quite a long room upstairs. We used to go up upstairs to shoot there. Again, that's changed tremendously. You're saying about what else did we have in the village? At the Corners Inn, what is now the dining room, the first part of the dining room, the second part has been built on fairly recently. Well, 40 years ago.
Yeah, that's recent.
That's recently. But the first part of that was a cycle shop and repair cycles, and then there was a leather shop on the end. Yeah.
Tell me about the leather shop.
Leatherwork, saddles and things.
Who ran that?
I can't remember. Hodges, I think his name was. I wouldn't put money on that, but that's the name that comes. Sarge Priest ran the cycle shop. He worked for the county council highways as a lorry driver in the daytime and did that at evenings and weekends.
Okay, so he repaired people's
Repaired
bikes.
bikes, fitted soldier tyres or whatever. Yeah. And it's difficult to say. As you look at the front of the pub, you've got the nice shape with the two windows.
Mm.
Well, the building came to an end there, and you could walk through off the road, through to the back, open air. And that's all been built in. Where you've got that area before, going through before the dining room, that was open.
Oh, that was open. Okay,
Yeah.
so when you come in the back door from the car park,
that was
an alley that went
straight
through
out to the road.
between what is now.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yes. And again, the pub itself, you came through the front door, and there was a door either side you, and you went up the stairs. That was the way up the stairs. You got the sort of one of the better rooms on your left. On your right was the smoke room, but the beard was drunk in the back, where the tables are now, the second part of the bar, you know. And there used to be, where you walk round the fire grate, the fire was in the same place, but the grate was on the back side of it. On the side where the fire is now was a kiosk where they took your orders and your money. And then you sat around the back on the side as you go in now through the back door, immediately on your right. That's where the darts was, and the beer was where they sit in that little recess at the far back bit on the right. Yeah. The beer was in barrels on a platform, and you ordered it at the kiosk, and they went up and they got it out of the barrels. It was fresh, and you got your beer there.
Where did the beer come from? Was it local?
Oh, I can't remember.
You can't remember? No, I just wondered. You know,
No.
So it was all beer, no cider about.
Oh yes, they have cider as well. Yeah, yes, and bottle beer off the shelf. Yeah, but the old boys used to sit around the fire where the second bar is now, back there, and you know, and play their cards on a table and that sort of thing, and the fire would keep them on. Yeah. I did learn to play crib there. By old Mr. Bengry taught me, but I've forgotten it.
So it was darts and cards and
Yeah,
beer.
yeah, and smoking,
and smoking, yeah.
pipes, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's right. No food, not in any of them. But it was entertainment.
And that kept going. Well,
After
you were
the-
young at the war, so you were
Yeah.
working.
Yeah,
you were working
well
then.
after that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Any other memories from when you were young,
Well, I suppose
or things that are different?
one of the main things in my life, personal, is the church.
Yeah, so I was going to come back to the church because
Yeah.
you talked about going to service, and
Yeah.
I've been told you've sung in the choir for nearly 70 years.
No, more than that.
More than that.
If I can get to next May, 10th of May next year, I've actually been in the choir 75 years. I
Sure.
joined the choir on the 10th of May, 1944.
Tell me all about this.
Yeah. We had 13 boys, sopranos, 5 pairs of brothers, and 3 others. There was the Davis brothers. When I actually joined, there were 3 Davis brothers, but John was just about to leave. His voice was breaking there. But there's Carl and myself. There was the Thomas brothers. They lived at Little Green, which is opposite the houses, what they'd done to the Showers houses. You know, their house had set back, quite a nice house set back there. Their father was deputy head at Lucton School, Brian and Rodri Thomas. The Joneses, the headmasters from Kingsland, his 2 sons, Ken and Lynn. The Pratts, Jeff and Douglas and Jeff, and the Craigs, who were Sarge Priest's stepsons, the bloke at the bug shop, David and Tom. That was the five lots of boys. And then there was my pal Bob Whittle from that I'm going to see tomorrow from Shrewsbury. He lived with his grandparents. His father died, and I don't know what the history was, but he came down from Walford near Brampton Bryan, down to, do you know where the Must Mill is?
Yes.
Down there across the field almost. Well, on the way to the Must Mill, and you can't see it today, all covered up is a little cottage. There was a cottage there, and Bob's grandparents lived there, and they brought him up then. He's only a youngster. He lived there. The Thomases, I told you, Little Green. The Pratts at Carson's. And the Craigs, the Sarge Priest, they lived in the top one of the old council houses. As you go down the road from here, and the council houses are on the right, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they lived in the top one there.
Okay.
And me and Carl lived in Birch Avenue.
So you were all in the choir.
We were all, yeah.
How old were you when
Well,
you started then?
I was a month off my 8th birthday, because they usually used to let them join when they were 8, and I joined a month early. Because my birthday's the 10th of June, and I joined on the 10th of May. Mr. Jones, well, the rector ran the choir at that stage, Jobling.
Okay.
Yes, he lived behind us in the big house where who's the fellow who lives now, who runs Smith, that's right. They lived there. Later on in his time, while he was still working, he wasn't very well. I used to push him from that house, through the wood, up the path, up the field to church on a Sunday morning in an old bath chair. You know, the wheel on the front was about that big. It was hard work taking him up. It wasn't so bad bringing him back. I used to push him up, and he used to stand and take the service on 2 sticks. And then I'd push him back again after.
How old was he?
Oh, well in his 70s, I think. Yes. He eventually retired and moved out of there into, again, just below me, the house below me. Because there's a bungalow there below our houses now, but that wasn't there, of course. And he lived in the house above Jack Price, if you like, you know, because you came in off the road, and there was that one on that there. That house belongs to Hamlyn Williams as well. His work, the workman off the farm lives there now, and he moved into there, and that's where he finally croaked it.
Tell me what you remember about Jobling, because he was rector for a very long time.
He was, and his father was a rector before him. The services were, you would call them old-fashioned today. We had matins in the morning, they had communion at 8 o'clock, and we had evensong in the evening. And that's how I was brought up in the choir. But as well as attending twice, I attended a 3rd time to Sunday school in the afternoon at 3 o'clock in church with Mr. Weaver, who lived at Cobnash, and he was a tenor in the choir, and he used to take the Sunday school.
What are your memories of Sunday school? What are your memories of Sunday school?
Sitting in the front rows of the pews, and Mr. Weaver there keeping order and telling us the stories. Yeah. we probably played up a little bit, but but it was, yes, it went for a long time. Yeah. He lived at Cobnash, as you're going to Cobnash from Kingsland. If you do a right left up the hill, and he lived at the top of that hill, a little cottage on the right. Yeah. In our choir we had was it 5 tenors? Five tenors. Weaver, this guy. Winders. Williams. And Wall. 4 W's. And Bert Crump, who was Val's grandfather.
Okay.
Was a tenor. Bert himself, her father, was in joined for a while, yeah, but I don't think he stayed all that long, as far as I remember. But his dad had been in a long time. The old Bert.
So what was it like being in the choir? You were only 8.
I was only 8. I soon learned. I'll tell you something I can remember. Mr. Jobling at his seat, sitting there, and we were sitting in a row up here, and him looking along there to make sure we weren't whispering and talking, or he'd knock his brass ring on the pew, and you knew you better behave then. And he used, right from the start, we used to go to choir practice on a Thursday evening. The choir boys would go at 6:45, and the rest at 15:15. He'd have a half an hour first, teaching us the music, and then Mr. Jones, the schoolmaster, took over because when the rector was taken poorly. So he took over, and we'd sometimes then have choir practice in the school, and go there early, and then the men would join us there in the winter time. Yeah. But we had a good choir we always have it all down the years. We're struggling now. We're all too old. The young ones don't seem to want to commit themselves. My daughter comes a bit now that she's moved in with us. She's coming again a bit. She was pretty regular, when she was before she was married and went away.
But I expect the attendance was much bigger when you were young.
Well, as I say, there were 13 sopranos. The 4 tenors. There was two basses on the left and 2 on the right. So we were quite a full choir.
And there must have been a lot more people going to church.
Oh yes, a lot more. I've got an itch.
Oh.
I got a spot there.
Oh.
Stop it. Do you know what I've done? I've left my coffee in the car. Yeah.
Tell me about hop picking.
And come down and catch the bus there, and it used to go down round Cobnash and out to Lucton, picking up the ladies on the way, and then back up to street. And we picked. We had to pick. We had to sit at the crib and pick hops, and we used to climb the poles to get the flags as they called them out of the wire. If you pull the vine down, some would usually stop in the wire. We'd climb the posts and get those down and pick them. We'd have a time off at lunchtime, and we usually used to go for a bit of a scout round then, and there was a wood at the bottom of the hop field, and the Pinsley went through that. So that was another sort of adventure for us, paddling and or falling in. I usually managed to fall in. And we used to light fires, get wood to light fires, to boil the kettle and that sort of thing. And yeah, a lot of the village went. It was very good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed hop picking.
Yeah, so you all went up the street.
And then we'd help to load the bags and things like this onto the truck. And if we could get it left, we'd go up to the farm and go and have a look around the hop kilns and all that.
Tell me about those. What were they like?
Well,
hop kilns and
you had various. The hops went up in quite big bags, but then they were all raised up a floor to where they were heated and dried out, and then after that, they were shoveled with great big pan shovels into pockets, hop pockets, which were very much stronger, and they were tall and not too wide, but very, very tall. And they used to shove and force those down in until they were solid hard, and then they went on lorries to wherever. Did that many years.
what did you enjoy about it? You said you enjoyed it.
Well, I quite enjoyed doing it, you know, because as I got older, I had a crib of my own, and I used to see how much money I could earn. Not that it was an awful lot, but you know, and I suppose the best bit was the party after when it all finished. We were all invited up to the farm to a party, and that was rather good.
Describe the party to me. How many people went? What did you do?
It was wartime, you know. They used to get coupons off the folks if they could, so as they could buy more stuff in. But it was stuff we weren't used to during the war, I can tell you, you know, like trifles and, you know, all sorts of stuff. Yeah, that was good.
Did they have music? Or did they have music?
No, it was just a sit-down feast, really. Yeah, yeah. A few incidents in the hop field. Once a horse ran away, because it was on a slope, and he ran away on the slope, and round the corner and along the bottom headland, there were some boys playing, and he was herring, you know, he was going fast, and he was heading towards them, and a German soldier who was working there from the camp. They used to bring him down from a camp at Prestige to work on the farm. He took off because he'd been up by the loading the bags, you know, and he took off, and if the horse was doing that, and he ran across, and he wasn't easy because it was up over the humps, and he ran across, and he dived at the horse's head and grabbed, and he was going quite quick, and grabbed the leathers and pulled him in and stopped him before he got to these children. Quite a feat, really. Amazing saving that was.
Wow.
Because it doesn't bear thinking about, does it? A cart horse running straight over some little kids. And then what was the other mad incident? Thunderstorm. Terrific thunderstorm. And we all ran up to, there was a shed in the corner, and we all ran up to the shed. There was one old woman from Clonnash, Mrs. Davis. I think her name was Davis. I can't remember. No relation. And she got her umbrella up. She was stopping where she was, and said, "You can't do that with an umbrella. The lightning might strike it." She said, "What about all these wires above my head?" He said, "Well, absolutely, come on." They got her in, and there was what do they call the thing? A terrific bang and a flash. I forget what the term was they used to use for that. So, yes, thunderbolt or something, yeah. And it rattled the shed with us all in, you know. But that was it then. It sort of, the storm went on, but it didn't get as bad as that. It was quite an experience.
How old were you then when you were in the shed?
I was probably about 10 or 12 or something like that. Yeah. Hey.
Wow.
We used to climb a lot of trees, which we shouldn't have done.
Tell me about tree climbing.
Well, some were pretty high, tall, you know, and we climbed. As I say, we climbed the posts up to get the things off the wire, the hops off the wire.
They're high, those posts, aren't they? They're very high, those hop
yes,
posts.
yeah. Well, they were about 8 feet, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes. But it was an extended holiday, actually, because I think they extended the school holidays to cover the hopping for the people to do.
Okay, because it's usually September.
Mm.
So, you mentioned the prisoner of war.
Yeah.
Where did they come from to help with the hop picking?
Prestine. There was a camp at Prestine.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And there's one, I think he died in the last couple of years, Alfred. And has lived in the village ever since.
Is that Alfred, is it Shatka? March?
No, that was Vernon Shatka.
Yeah.
I don't remember him up there, whether he was or not, or whether he was. He probably was.
So
he probably was up there. And the other one, Alfred Schultz, he was, and he lived in one of the houses at on the Rectory corner, you know, the houses there. But I think he had to go in a hospital. I think he possibly died, although surely something would have been made of it. I can't remember going to a funeral.
So his name was Alfred Schultz.
Schultz.
And he was a prisoner of war.
He was a prisoner of war.
And he stayed. And he stayed in Kingsland.
He stayed after the war, yes.
Mm.
But he never married. He never married. He lived with who did he live with? Frida. No, she married another, Frida Jenkins. She married another, and I can't remember what his name was now. She was the secretary at Kingsland Sawmills. And she lived, you know, when you come down from Kingsland Sawmills towards Kingsland, and the house in front of you with a very steep roof, she married and they had that and they built that house.
Okay.
What's his name? His name? Rudy Shatka. She married.
Oh, because there's Marjorie Shatka.
Oh, that was Vernon Shatka.
Is that Vernon?
Oh no, it wasn't then. Yeah, but it was Rudy
something.
Another
one. It was Rudy.
Yeah, Rudy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to tell me a bit more about the church.
I've been involved with Kingsland Church virtually all my life. I was taken to church at the age of about 3, and used to play up in the seats during the service, and got into trouble. But I grew up a little bit, and at the age of 7 and 11 months, I joined the choir as a soprano, I had to have an inspection by the vicar who was running the choir at the time, Mr. Jobling, and he made me read the Lord's Prayer to make sure I could read, and then he made me sing the national anthem to make sure I could sing. And I passed that and joined the choir. That was on May the 10th, 1944. You might be interested to know I'm still a member. And if I can get to May the 10th next year, I shall have completed 75 years. That's my choir. And we've done all sorts of things in that time, and I still enjoy it. Along the way, I've worked in the churchyard quite a lot, and I'm still doing that, although I ought to know better at my age. And we still go in and work on every other Thursday to keep it reasonably tidy, because we couldn't afford to pay anybody to do it up to that standard. And there are a lot of others who help as well. One of the things I along the way, I was talked into being by the Reverend Herbert Thomas to being church warden. I wasn't very old. It was back in the 70s. I didn't think I was really old enough to take on that because our church wardens had all been quite elderly. Anyway, he twisted my arm and I said yes. And I did 18 years as church warden, and then I did another 10 as a deputy, helping along those new ones that came in after me. Lots of stuff to do in that time, but one of the little stories, people say, "You didn't do that, did you?" I took charge of changing the bulbs in the lighting. And in those days, it was a different system to what we have today. And the lights were huge, big cylinder lights, like floodlights, really, dangling from the beams in the roof of the church. And to change a bulb, I used to have to go up the tower, walk along a little narrow platform and duck so that I didn't bang my head on the roof, across to the relevant beam, and then crawl across the beam to above where the light was, and lie on it and hold myself on and reach down underneath, and I could just reach the big bulb with one hand. And it was very difficult to get enough grip to turn it. But I did, and I managed to take bulbs out and screw new bulbs in and crawl back again, and then back along the gangplank back to the tower. And that was a job which had to be done not often, but too often, really. Later on in time, after the lights were changed, the bulbs aren't quite so high now, but I still had to change them, and it meant getting a ladder, which I used to walk down to Ruth and Les Millard's place and carry it all the way up the churchyard, and put it up, and I could reach a lot off the ladder. There was one area that I used to have to stand on the back of the pew to raise the ladder high enough to get to the bulb, and then come down and go back up the ladder. And that went reasonably well, apart from one occasion when, on reducing the ladder after I changed the bulb, I was again standing on the top of the pew, got the ladder out of its hitch and lost balance, and the ladder swayed and managed to fall straight through the glass window, the leaded glass window. So I wasn't very popular with that, but there we are. It happened.
When was that?
I'm not sure. It was probably in the 80s or 90s.
And at what age were you crawling along the beams to change the old lights?
Well, in my 40s.
Okay.
Yes. And I was glad when I didn't have to do that anymore.
I bet.
Yes.
So, tell me a bit about football in Kingsland, because sport's been a big thing in your life, and you were in the football team, Kingsland's football team, which no longer exists.
So. Kingsland football team. I used to go and watch it as a youngster. It had ceased, of course, during the war years. Sorry, and started up again afterwards. Now they used to play on the recreation ground, and if you don't know where that is, it's the field behind the fire station, where a footpath goes across, and it backed onto the rectory gardens and the back wood, and they played football there. And we also played cricket there, or they played cricket there in those days. The football side was always pretty good and did well. And then my father started to run a junior side, a minors, which I and my brother played for a while. It's only a short period because you soon get over the age limit. And I became a goalkeeper. I hadn't had any thoughts about that, but it happened. And I played in goal for the minors, and I also went in and played with Leinster minors for a while, and so did brother Carl.
How old were you when you were playing for Kingsland?
I was 15, and I went in for a couple of years, up to 18 in the Leinster minors. And then I came back and played in the Kingsland football team. I was asked to play, and I played my first game. I do know the date, but I've lost it at the moment. I'll try and think of it just now. And of all things, the first game was played on the same day as our secretary, Bill Barrow's daughter, got married. And we went to the wedding in the morning, and we went to the village hall in the afternoon to follow it, and then we went to play football. And that was my first game in goal for Kingsland. And we played Radnor Valley, and we won 3-0. And that was my start to playing for Kingsland. And I played there for quite a number of years. And in the process, I got picked to play for the Herefordshire County side, amateur side, which we used to play the other counties, travel quite a bit for that. Until about 1960, yes, before that, I did have a little spell with Hereford United Birmingham League side when their senior goalkeeper broke his arm, and the reserve keeper went up, and I took his place in the reserves. And I think I had 5 games there, and I wasn't allowed to play anymore because if I had, I wouldn't have been able to come back and play for Kingsland, because there's a ruling of playing in senior football and junior football, as the North Hereford League was. So I came back and finished off as captain of Kingsland, and that was the year we won the league. And so I missed a chance perhaps, but had I been replacing the reserve keeper, I would have stayed and try and kept the place. But as I was only standing in for him and he was playing in the senior side above me, he was obviously going to come back. So I left it at that.
Any good stories about Kingsland football team? What did you all get up to when you were young playing football?
Oh, drinking. No. Only a bit. We travelled in all sorts of ways, but mainly in Markham's bus, in the North Hereford League. And then we played in the Junior Cup, HFA Junior Cup, which took us further afield, all around Herefordshire. And we were a very good side. I was lucky to play in a very good side. And we actually won the HFA Junior Cup 2 years running. And that hadn't been done. The last time that had been done was 50 years before by Hay St Mary's.
So what year was this that you won? What year was this that you won the cup?
Should have looked that up, shouldn't I? It was the late 50s, in perhaps 1960. When that photograph, was that 1960, wasn't it? Yes, the 1959-60 was the second time, and then the year before we'd won it as well. And that was quite something for a junior side. And it's quite something for Cliff Davis because he was captain both games, both years.
So why did Kingsland football stop? What happened? When did it stop and why?
Well, I got headhunted and went from Kingsland to Kington, which was the senior standard, and played in the Mid Wales League for 5.5 seasons. Kingsland went on for a number of years. I'm not quite sure quite how long, but it did fold. They lost members and the old ones packed it in, and they were having difficulties, and sadly it folded. They did try to start it up again on a Sunday, and then the people living at the old rectory, as it was then, didn't like it, and more or less put a stop to it. So that was the end of football in Kingsland, really, and that must have been in the 80s, perhaps. Yes.
Something else you were very involved in was cricket.
Yes. That's taken up quite a bit of time in my life as well. Cricket, played at Lucton School, and while I was there in the summer holidays, I used to come down the last couple of years and fill in for Kingsland if they were short. And I played a few games for them and play in the evening knockouts. I used to do that while I was still at school. That was very enjoyable. I enjoyed my cricket very, very much. Then I played a few games in 1952, which was the year I left school. And sadly, the cricket side folded. They were pretty all old men except me, or getting on, and finishing. And the next year they didn't run a side. So Kingsland were without a cricket side from 1952 to 1960. And in 1960, a few of us got together who lived in Kingsland and played cricket. We had to go and play cricket elsewhere. I played 2 or 3 seasons at Erdesland, and then 3 or 4 seasons at Jobling. And then Ray Jones was a big instigator, and myself and a few others, and we got together and we decided that we could probably raise a team again. Originally, we'd played on the recreation ground in the middle of the football pitch, would you believe it? And we used to get that ready for cricket before the cricket season. But that had all gone by the board by then. So we needed a pitch. And in the end, we managed to get a piece off the side of the rugby pitch, which was then up North Road. And Mr. Morgan, the landlord, agreed with us and helped us quite a bit. And we had an awful lot of work to do to get a cricket square out of a field that had never had anything like that on it. And the way we decided to do it, we got a Cambridge roll, which was a little low, heavy, very heavy roll with what do you call them, like teeth on it. Mm-hmm. And I always remember in the February, we got several lads there pushing this thing up and down, churning it up and cutting it all up, and then the other way, and doing it the other way. Before then, we started with a flat roll, and we'd still got our own old flat roll that we'd had, that the old team had at the recreation ground, and we managed to get a pitch there, and we started Kingsland Cricket Club again in 1960, and there are pictures available, which is excellent really. And from then the team went on as Kingsland until about early 70s, and in the meantime we'd had to move from that cricket ground and start all over again, and we went up and followed Luctonians up to Mortimer Park, and there was room between two rugby pitches to make a cricket square.
So where was the original one that you started? You said Mr. Morgan, the landlord?
Yes, that was in North Road. We'll have to get to that. Luctonians had originally started to play in 1948 their rugby on the Borsfield, which is at the back of St Michael's Avenue, across the first part of the field on the second part. And they played on there for a number of years. And then they changed and moved up to North Road, which is the field behind the row of houses, halfway up North Road. And that's where we joined them at cricket. And then they bought the fields and the land at Mortimer Park, and eventually we had to move, more or less had to move as well, because the farmer wanted to plough the field. Mm-hmm. And Luctonians were very good, and so we went up and made a square on the ground there. And we played there for 2 or 3 years as Kingsland, and then there was a suggestion, why didn't we amalgamate and become Luctonians, which everyone thought was a good idea. And sadly, Kingsland Cricket Club folded again, but it didn't. We were still there, and we've played as Luctonians ever since. And they've got 3 good sides now.
Yeah, it's a big cricket club now.
Yes.
Oh, it's interesting how it started.
Yes.
And got involved with Luctonians. There was one story that I wanted to ask you. You mentioned about, as a boy, birds nesting.
Yes.
Tell me all about what you young lads
Yes.
used to do,
Well,
and where you used to go.
We in our spare time, which seemed to be plenty in those days, we walked and went all over the place, down the little prill from the Rectory Wood, down to the Pinsley, and paddled in the stream down there, and we played in the rectory wood. I lived very close to it, and we used to go birds nesting. Everybody did, and keep a tray of. We didn't take all the eggs. We just took an egg of a sort of a bird. I know it became sort of illegal, or it was stopped. But grown-ups used to do it as well. and also we used to go up on the Tars, which was a lovely old place. It's a lovely place now. But in those days, the land which is now farmed was basically a moorland with bracken and bushes and what have you, running right up into the wood, into the Tars wood. And we spent a lot of time up there, and of course the weir was there where we learnt to swim, and that was great. And we did our birds nesting up there as well. And there was one thing I always remember about that, was there was a buzzard's nest, and there weren't many buzzards about in those days. And there was a buzzard's nest in a big fir tree just outside the west end of the wood, on the top of the hill. It was about, 15, 20 yards away from the wood. And the pair of buzzards used to be flying around. We'd watch them. And one day I decided I ought to go and see if they'd got any eggs. And my father was very interested in birds, and he knew about this, and he said, whatever you do, don't take any eggs out of the buzzard's nest. So we abided by that. But on one occasion, I did climb this tree. We were always climbing trees, but this was quite a big one. And I climbed right up to the buzzard's nest, and there were two lovely eggs sat in the nest. And of course, we didn't have cameras and things with us in those days. I wish we had. It would have been nice to have taken. But I still feel pleased that I got up and saw it and left it in good shape. Yeah.
That's a really interesting story.
Yeah.
Very tall. They do pick very tall trees to nest in, don't they? Mm.
Yeah. Yes, and did you have the swimming one on?
Yeah, we talked about swimming.
Yes.
With Hamlyn Williams. So you've told me so much in your visits. We're going to put these all together. I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions just to wind up with, really. What do you think are the biggest changes you've seen in your time in Kingsland?
Well, as it goes on, I suppose housing, really. There were very few houses up North Road, really. We'd got the Willows, where Lady Eastall lives. The next one was Lord House, Yew Tree House, and Lilac House. And that was it between the Corners Inn and Chapel Lane. Nothing else. And then from Chapel Lane there was a cottage for the chapel, which was, what's his name? Roberts. Gordon Roberts's people lived there, and Gordon lived there. And from there was nothing till the monument on that side of the road. And if you go up the other side, there was Croftmead, West End, the black and white cottage, nothing between them.
So what was in between? Was it just fields?
Yes, well, yes, just our house was built on the garden of the black and white cottage, and then the field that they just built on. So there was nothing there. And then from there, you went straight to the Wardens. Nothing there. And from the Wardens, there was High Tree House, And then I remember 2 or 3 houses up on the right-hand side. North Acre, where Ruth Fisher used to live. The next one, which is much bigger, it's been doubled in size, where Mr. de Grey, who owned the cafe in Ludlow, used to live. And then he built North Acre. And the house after that, I've forgotten the name of it, where Katie lives, Mr. Dunning used to live in that. And he was our bass, and he used to have a very deep voice. And he used to live there. And then there was one more house at the far end. So there was about 1, 2, 3, perhaps 5 houses there, and the others have been infilled since.
So it must have felt very different.
Very, yes. A bit lonely.
A bit lonely?
Yes.
Tell me more.
At night time, no street lights. That was different. And I remember the Horsfield houses being built there, and then, of course, all the way down there, little cul-de-sacs and things have gone in since. But I knew everybody that lived in every house, and I haven't a clue today, which is sad. It's just sad. I know a few, but not many.
Yes, because there's a lot more people live here now.
That's right.
And what's your favourite? You've told me so many stories and so many things you've done. What's your favourite memory of Kingsland from the past?
Well, playing football and playing cricket. Those lead up. Being a choir member. I've had so much enjoyment singing all down the years. Visiting the pubs when I got old enough. They were very much pubs. They weren't eating houses in those days, and we had lots of fun, lots of people, lots of singing in the pub, and it was very enjoyable. Yeah.
And is there anything you'd like to add, or any stories you want to tell me that you haven't mentioned?
I expect it'll come up as soon as you switch off.
We can always get together again if you suddenly remember things.
Yes.
I just wondered if there's anything that...
Oh, I think that covers most things. Yes. The certainly the August bank holiday carnival and sports.
Yes.
And flower show. That was a big deal in the year.
Tell me about that, because it was a different time at the beginning of the month.
Yes.
And you've shown me a picture of the parade.
Yes.
So tell me what was going on.
Well, they used to have a marquee with a flower show, and they marked out a course for sports and racing. I have got some pictures of that somewhere. Excuse me. No, it's all right. And but it was just everybody came, and it was just a great day, and the people who organised it worked hard. It was very good. I've got a photograph. At the carnival, of course, it was judged, so that people went out of their way to do things. I'll bring you a photograph of what do you call it?
Oh, like stocks.
Yes.
Or
That's right. That's right.
Or stocks.
With the WI ladies of Kingsland, all dressed in black. It's a great, and my mother's on it. It's a great photograph.
What year was that then?
That's got to be the 50s.
Okay, so when did the carnival run from and to?
I can't remember how the year they changed. They changed the bank holiday. That must have been the 70s, I would think. So it went on quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But Yes, there was a lot of fun for everybody on the day. We used to have this obstacle race, which was climbing up over a cart, over bales, under a canvas, what else? All sorts of things. And then before the finishing line, we had to dive our head in a bucket of water and catch an apple with our mouth and get over the line. So that was great fun for us boys. Yeah.
So this was going when you were young? When
Yes,
you were a
yes,
child?
in early teens, and yeah.
Well, Cliff, you've been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for spending so much time and sharing all your memories.
Thank you.